I want to take a moment to speak directly to Asian Americans because this election and this moment in American history is so critical for you. I don't just want to praise you for your contributions to American society, to the American economy, and for making our culture vibrant and powerful. These are obvious facts. There's more. For me personally, as an American who went to public high school in San Francisco, who went to Lowell High School, which was some 75% Asian, Asian culture, Asian Americans made up a large part of my friends from an early age. And then I studied in Taiwan, in Japan, in Korea, and then taught as a professor of Asian Studies at University of Illinois, George Washington University, and elsewhere. Asia was my life, is my life. I speak Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, and I feel these are essential languages for Americans that all Americans should be familiar with, because Asia is our future. Moreover, I've been learning quite a lot about India, about Myanmar, about Thailand and Vietnam, where I have offices of the Asia Institute, but Bangladesh, Thailand, Laos, and other countries, which have become very central in my understanding of the world. And of course, all of these countries and other Asian countries have citizens in virtually every state in the United States. And you are making an enormous contribution, especially in this extremely dangerous and challenging age. What I want to speak about, above all, is the subtle, cynical efforts of certain rich and powerful elements in the United States to use anti-Asian rhetoric as a means to create a boogeyman enemy for the American people and to create racist, racial conflicts in the United States. This has begun again, especially with Chinese Americans, who, as you know, are facing tremendous issues, starting with the question of immigration, even mere travel to the United States, and many of the outstanding Chinese Americans in universities and throughout our society are increasingly finding themselves facing discrimination, inability to get jobs in so-called sensitive fields in technology, not to be able to get clearance, not to be promoted, in a blatantly racist effort to deal with the very serious issue of multinational criminal action by multinational banks and corporations and other rich players, to confuse that with actual ethnic groups of people, Americans, who are making a very real contribution to our country. Now, it may be about Chinese Americans today, but there should be no doubt in anyone's mind that the strategy is to expand the parameters of this ugly racist campaign to all Asians, and to make Asians, in the same way has been done to African Americans or to Native Americans or to Hispanics, the target for various racist strategies and policies. There is a dark history behind this. In the 19th century, there was what's best known as the Yellow Peril strategy of trying to marginalize and attack, starting with Chinese and Chinese Americans, Asian groups. In the case of the Yellow Peril, it was argued specifically the Chinese were from an alien civilization which was inscrutable, which could not be understood, and which was hostile and bent on destroying so-called Western civilization. This rhetoric was used by politicians to seduce and to mislead labor in the United States, and it led in 1882 to the Chinese Exclusion Act, which essentially limited and then eliminated immigration from China to the United States, and that policy was extended so that really until the end of the Second World War, immigration from China and immigration from other Asian countries like Japan, Korea, and elsewhere was extremely limited. What's important to remember in terms of American identity is that the decision to limit immigration from Asia, especially from China, meant that in that period from 1880 to 1920, when American immigration to America reached a high point, that it was intentionally and racially determined so that immigration came from Eastern Europe and Italy and Ireland, and it did not come from Asia. That affected the ethnic makeup of the United States, and if those policies had not been adopted, we would have a very different America. And we have a very different America today as well. We also remember that during the Second World War, a blatantly racist policy of internment, placing Japanese Americans, citizens, in camps during the war as potentially disloyal Americans, was adopted as federal policy, and many Japanese Americans lost their jobs, often their land and their property, and were put in camps for the duration of the war. It's important to remember, of course, that German Americans, Italian Americans, and other Americans who could have been questioned in the same way were not. And the difference was clearly based upon concepts of race and culture. I don't think any of us should be so foolish as to think these sorts of racist policies will not be adopted again. That risk is enormous, and it is absolutely essential that we stand with other Asian Americans against these unconstitutional, unethical, racist, and threatening policies and practices, and of course rumors and speeches and other anti-Asian rhetoric that surrounds us. We must take a very strong stand